This is IBM Museum. I do intend to show a little bit more of this IBM ThinkCentre, and this is the model number, interesting enough, is 8086-W4R. So it's a 8086 WAR is how you could look at it in leet speak. But I wanted to do a little short video on this because the main aspect for me is that it has a Sound Blaster sound card in there. And I do that for hosting that Audigy box. It's there back there behind it. But this Sound Blaster board is about the biggest PCI board that'll fit in the unit. There's only a single PCI slot, and on the front of it you can see a ruler. It's 12 inches long, and this thing is not even 11 inches wide. And then on top I have a 6-inch ruler, just showing the length from front to back for this unit. And I'll probably go through, I do have some still photos, but I will go through, I've got my camcorder going, and I think I've got it set to the highest resolution. And I have it where I can see on the output on the screen behind me here too. But going through and opening up, there's tabs on either side, or buttons on either side. And this lid lifts up, and you can actually see on the back of it, it has some pictures as far as showing how to open it up. And this, and I have to be very careful. I'll move my bottle of isopropyl alcohol. I'm of course still cleaning it. You saw the honeycomb on the front, and that design is kind of neat looking, but only when it's clean. It just sure accumulates dust, and just this cake dust in all these little places. And so I go through on Q-tips, and you can't even you got to work to get a Q-tip the right size. It'll actually go through and start cleaning this unit. And so on the inside, I can even maybe work up. When I stayed online, I figured that I'd pick this up just a little bit more than 10 years ago. And it was interesting at that time because the unit quickly, for a span of time, actually became my daily driver, my system that I commonly use the most. And at that time, and I actually did an upgrade. I listed where I did the, I'll go through and pull that up here in a moment, because I did do, I'm not sure if the unit came with a hard drive on it, but I did put a larger drive in there, or a drive that would have been bigger than stock. And I do have the certificate of authenticity on the side for Windows XP, or what's called the COA of XP Home. And the primary limitation on this unit, beyond it's a Pentium 4 hyperthread. There's a label on the top of that. But it's and it's a nice speed for a Pentium 4. It's one of the later Pentium 4 CPUs, but it only has the ability to do 2 GB of RAM. And so just Windows XP, you just got to give it a little bit of time. And I've had the the unit has crashed on me, but definitely it can be slow if it's got a whole bunch of stuff loaded into memory. Let me go through and pause, and I'll bring up, I've got some still photos I want to show of this camera view. And so on this first one, and I can even go through and take the webcam view away, but this is a still photo I took as I was working with the unit just a bit ago. And it's showing like I have in the view from above. Let me go through. I had to get back to where, and you can see kind of how creative I am in that photo, of how everything just has to be tucked in to these areas. The power cable, there's even a power that goes to the PCI adapter, and how it has to be kind of tucked in there. There's a the IDE channel for the CD or DVD player. It looks like it's marked as a DVD, and how they've gone through and stranded that cable. I'll show, and you actually press this down, and the front pivots out and up, and it actually pivots away from. There's some USB and audio connections that are there towards the front of the unit, and the front has to come off of that. And I actually have to go through, and if I bring this out fully, I have to disconnect this power connection because it just is too long, and it gets to be where, and I've got photos and showing how close it is to the case, but there's even a guide for the stranded, how this cable, the IDE cables are set up. And of course it doesn't use the this for the hard drive. It's got a SATA hard drive connection, and I think that's what I may have actually used. I saw the SATA connection was available, and so I put a SATA drive in there, and it looks like it has the power connection and everything else. I could have gone either way with the older ATA IDE drive or a SATA drive, and even have where, you know, the clip that is stuck on a portion of the case as is even loose in this case. And I take the SATA cord and I tuck it back away. And of course the CPU heatsink and Northbridge chip, unit fan, and the power supply is actually right below this PCI slot, and the still photos show it a little bit better because it's angled right here, and there's a fan in the front of this little miniature fan. And I've gone through, and for the sound card, I had to even cut off the top of it. Had a additional layer where it to hold the ribbon cable for the joystick down underneath, and I had to cut that off the top to have enough space below the DVD drive. And this is of course a laptop style DVD drive that's in there. And of course the joystick cable, and I'll show a little bit of that, I go straight back, and I actually have a portion of the PCI bracket where it goes low for one of the connectors is notched just to allow that ribbon cable to go through. And it's not loose. It actually I've just got enough notched away to where that it still holds that ribbon cable in place for it going out the back and being able to connect up the joystick I have here. And I've still got to do some clean inside. Let's go to some steel photos here. I'm not going to go through and even pull the PCI card. It's on a riser, and then it's held horizontally there. But I've got some pictures that we can go through. Okay, and this is an overhead view, of course, and it shows that power connection coming in. And it's even interesting that right where that power connection is, the case sidewall goes out a little bit. So there's even a little bit more room for that power connector to be there. And of course, the leads from that really don't have just any room at all. I mean, they go on a immediate turn from there against the side of the case. That blue tab that's by the power connector, that's to lift that whole riser assembly out of the unit. That's part of the system itself. And it holds that PCI card in a bracket. The other later ThinkCentres from IBM, my XP system that I commonly have is what I call the tweener system to do the diskettes. It's got the diskette drive. It has the PCI riser on the opposite side, and I think it's even got where the PCI up above, standard old PCI, and then like a PCIe below that. But let's get on to more photos here. And this is right at the front of the unit. And it shows just how tight, I mean, the end of that PCI board and the power supply is underneath. And of course, it's metal. I don't want any contact to short out anything, but I didn't have to put anything below the adapter because it's actually where that edge kind of holds to the slope of that power supply. And but it's right there. I mean, this is the absolute, I don't think necessarily IBM designed this or Crave Labs went through, and when they designed this board, they said, oh, let's make it so it fits in this unit. It just happens that, you know, for all the dimensions of the card, it just barely fit for every location. And I had it planned for putting in this this adapter, but I had to go through and mock it up and see how it fit. And you can even see the top of that joystick connector where it's been cut away on either side to where the that ribbon cable doesn't go over the top of that, just to give it some space, because that DVD drive, when it comes down, it's in the set in that operating position, just doesn't have any room over the top of that joystick connector. And here it is shown from the side, that slope of the power supply coming up to fit that square fan. And there's probably about a 1/4 inch or so that's below the Sound Blaster board. And just like I say, that notch right there, it just fits just absolutely flush up against that. And here's the power connection of the adapter, and you can see in this instance it just has that kind of the little, at least the case is stepped back, where right at that where that power plug is for the wires to be able to go, just bend around and go to where they need to go. Here's a view above of the power connection. Just those wires in there, they fit. You'd have to pull the adapter out to ultimately disconnect that power connection at that end. And just another view of that ribbon cable going back to where I've got that notch on the bracket for the Sound Blaster board. So the Sound Blaster is modified for all that. The adapter, I mean, I've gone through and I've notched that little bracket. And it's not by much. It's like 1/8 of an inch or so, just to allow that ribbon cable to slip through. And here it is on the back. And I should have actually done a lower photo, but it's right. Both these black connections go to the Audigy box. And the one on the right is actually a, I'm trying to think of for the Apple systems were the ones that had it, and I'm actually drawing a blank, a little bit faster than USB initially for the USB 1 and USB 2. And the Audigy goes through and it does replicate that port on the front. I don't know if it goes through and really uses that internally. And I think it's got a connection on the front. Oh, FireWire. If I think a little bit more. And it's got a FireWire connection on the back of the Audigy box. I guess it'd be good if I need to show my source. Okay, there we go. On the back of the Audigy box, it has that FireWire port. I have to get it to a point where my webcam doesn't hide it away. And then there's these 80 links is what it considers that kind of that FireWire style connection, and the other little micro-miniature connection on the back. Here's the front. This unit's a little bit dirty. I've got a couple of I've used the optical outs and stuff like that on these units, and that's why I don't have a plug in it. But that's the box. And it's even funny, I was even thinking of doing a little bit of a video because I do use this unit to connect up to a keyboard, a MIDI keyboard, and it's got the MIDI in and out. Get those labels kind of focused. If the camera will focus. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so MIDI in and MIDI out. And the cables themselves, and it's mismatched, if you remember exactly, this is the MIDI out port, and it actually has a, it does have in printed, and embossed on the cable, and out. And the other end of the cable, and I thought the manufacturer, and of course probably just cheap Chinese, these are still relatively folded for the source I got them, but it does have those embossed at the other end as well, in and out. And the interesting thing is the in cable, and I think these are sold as a pair as it is anyway, but the in cable is labeled in at both ends and the out cable labeled out at both ends. And you'd think the manufacturer would know enough to reverse the connections that it'd say in at one side and out on the other side, just that they're the nature of the cable. I mean, you go to another MIDI device and it is it has the opposite labeled connector. MIDI out on one side is MIDI in on the other. And I think I have it set up that way, so I put it in, I can just put them into my keyboard, and I know that the MIDI in is going into the MIDI in on my keyboard, MIDI out's going to the MIDI out on the keyboard. Just that loop that's set up with that. And it's a little bit like, I have my punch down tool for the telephony stuff, the more than just necessarily the network stuff. And it's a Chinese replica, and it says cut on both sides, even away from cutting the cable on just one side. And I don't know, they just copied the device and they saw cut on that one side, and they just happened to duplicate it for both sides. Now, the last photo here will be kind of going through, this is that handy reference again of the overhead view on how I've got the cables set up or nestled in together. Got the Molex power plug over to in a kind of a compartment area that where it fits, just to the left of that stranded IDE cable. It's taped together real nice. I have that spare end of the IDE cable out because it doesn't fit underneath anywhere with that Sound Blaster board being in there. And then the SATA cable, that red cable, over on the left being kind of bunched up in that particular area. You know, hopefully not cutting down as much airflow because the Pentium 4s are known for running hot. And in particular, those last units, the hyperthread units, being operating at the 3 gigahertz. And I did say, let me go through and pause the video because I need to pull up the page where I went through and described when I got the unit. And this is actually a page on CNET that goes through and talks about the specifications I'll cover just right before. And of course, they got these ads popping up, and at least we won't hear audio or anything else from them. But so it's a Pentium 4, and it's like a 3.06 gigahertz, and it came stock with a 40 gigabyte drive, and I would probably expect that that was an IDE style. And I guess this is the KUD submodel, and I have the W4R submodel, but it's still probably a ThinkCentre S50, and that ultra small form factor is the USFF. And some of this is kind of off the screen, but it does give the chipset to the system and things like that. L2 cache size and installed size and the maximum, and that's where I got that maximum of the 2 gigabyte for this particular model. So I have the largest DIMM modules that this system supports in there, and even to the point of the operating temperature and things like that. Max operating temperature is below 9 degrees, but them Pentium 4s, they get pretty toasty. And yeah, it shows as ATA 100 for the hard drive, and that would be the IDE style connection. It does have the SATA interface as it shows there. And there's the information on the CPU. And they marked that as a Lenovo, and it's interesting enough that, I mean, this model is branded as IBM, but it was right at the probably at the handoff. And the web page I'm referring to, yeah, the web page where I listed when I got the system, and it just happens that there was a topic was IBM nuts, and this is just discussing about the sale of the PC line to Lenovo. And I answered down, and this gave me a timeline of when I got the system. Oh, I see some familiar names there. Okay, there I am. And so here I listed and that I got it, and I don't know where I bought it online. I don't think it was an eBay auction or anything like that. Might have been. And I talked about where I did the upgrade to a 320 gigabyte SATA hard drive off of the 40 gigabyte or whatever was in there, or if it was empty. And then I jokingly said I can use that I use an IBM 8086 on a daily basis. And that is probably a little bit of reference to the PS2 Model 30 that was also my one of my daily systems for kind of the vintage line that I used for a lot of years. And I identified that talking about the Model 25s and 30s. And we've shown it's it's a very small unit, physically small. And This is December 9th of 2010. So a little bit over 10 and a half years ago. And I just thought it was interesting for all that I've got the information out there when I picked the system up and what my initial use was and how I upgraded it. And we are back to that still photo. I'll go through and hide my webcam because this is the image I have to use in going through and putting folding it in back in place, putting the covers back down, connecting all the power leads. And so I'll go down with this. We're going to keep the spare IDE side able. We'll go down far enough to where I can connect up the power, and we're going to feed that folded cable, that IDE cable, down there in the little place that IBM liked it to be. Let's get kind of the SATA cable out here, so that goes kind of tucked away where it needs to, not really infringing upon airflow or anything like that. And the front of the case, even, it has to be pushed back and it kind of clicks in place there. But even as it was, like I say, when I had that joystick cable, this top portion wouldn't fully seat down or anything like that. And I had to work at getting, just figuring out modding the card in there and figuring out what I had to go through once I determined that the adapter itself physically fit, just all the connections. And just with the different connections, that is very tight. Even some of these spare cables, there's just not really any slack at all that these can go to or anything like that. But that is all tucked back in place and should be operational to go through and close the cover on it. Put my little ruler back up there for showing what 6 inches is on the top, and the foot-long ruler out front here, and get back to a view of the front. I can get myself back on the screen, and I'll get working back on cleaning this unit up a little bit more. There's a little bit of dusting I'll have to do on the inside to clean it and everything else too. There is even thankfully a very small spill just in that right under where it has IBM, and I don't know if that was grandkids or anything else having drinks close to it, or even may have been me, but thankfully that there's a little bit of stain to the metal, but it didn't look like it got back anywhere close to the system planer or anything like that to where it did any damage. But I'll go through and clean a little bit of that up as well. And I've used this unit. I mean, it operates in the condition it is, in that dirty condition, but get it cleaned up. And as I have it open, I can probably go through. I'm not aware really of this vintage being any of the capacitor related stuff, being a problem or anything like that on it, but I'll go through and check, and just being aware that heat in there, and like I've had with my other ThinkCentre models, that paste, drying out or having to have a new batch of thermal paste. I don't know if IBM used pads or thermal paste or whatever in this case on that CPU. If I were to see overheating issues where that heatsink is not getting, the transfer is not getting hot from the CPU itself, I'd go through there and redo all that as part of kind of a little bit of maintenance to keep this unit operational. But I thought it'd be a nice little short. I'm coming on right on a half hour of video. And I was hoping to be a little bit shorter than that for just a really brief overview of the system and discussing that sound card that I've got installed in here. But if you enjoyed this video, click on that like button, please. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, invite your friends to subscribe to my channel too. I haven't looked at the subscriber count. It's over 300 now, but I like to keep an eye on that and hope that that increases. But that is all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.